Chat MVP last week was Blazin' Daily, so he gets to pick a segment. His choice was some Mike McCarthy replacement options after the 2020 campaign, if, of course, things go the way I think most of us think it's going to. Cowboys should be about a 10, maybe 11-win team. And then we know how the playoffs go for this organization. So will Mike McCarthy be the Cowboys head coach in 2025? Y for yes, N for no. Go ahead and sound off for me in the comments section. To an extent, we probably wouldn't have this conversation with very many other head coaches. 3 straight 12-win campaigns. Now, the issue is there's one playoff win in that time frame, and that's a big disappointment for a team that's been searching for playoff success for nearly 30 years now. There was no contract extension for Mike McCarthy. The Packers' playoff loss was such an unmitigated disaster. I think everyone gets the lack of commitment to this overall team. There's really no commitment from a roster, player, coaching, personnel, contract standpoint. But I also feel bad for Big Mike because this team has not been set up for success. They said do more with less, which is not how any other playoff organization goes about its business. He's not like in a contract year. So some candidates we'll group by tiers here. First up are the big fish, the former NFL head coaches who at various points have all been ranked in the top 5 NFL head coaches. And Bill Belichick certainly stands out as the most notable name. He wasn't great with Cleveland. He was really good with New England when Tom Brady was there. Kind of fell off down the stretch. One of the most winningest coaches, or one of the most, I think that's right, winningest coaches in NFL history. He's not that far away from having the most wins in NFL history, being number 1. One thing to remember with Bill Belichick, A, he loves Dak Prescott. B, he doesn't want to sit around for a rebuild. He also wants power, whether he admits it or not. I think that's how NFL organizations feel about it. Are you going to give all the power in the world to Bill Belichick? He doesn't want to be here for a rebuild. So I don't think the theory of the Cowboys are clearing the roster out so Bill can do whatever he wants makes sense. It's a good roster. It hasn't delivered in the postseason. I think Bill would rather have the good roster. Next up is Mike Vrabel, who is got like a, coaching intern, an advanced assistant, hanging out around the organization, around the Browns right now. Of course, Fancy's not going anywhere. Vrabel, the issue here is, he went 9-7 2 straight years. Nice little playoff run in 2019. 11-5, 11-5, 7-10, 6-11. The roster kind of fell apart in at the end of Vrabel's tenure. Some of that is his fault. Some of that is not his fault. How much control does he want? And do you want to go with a non-offensive mind? And because that doesn't always work out too well. But that's a big-time name. He's swinging for the fences to an extent, right? I think that also fits with kind of an under-the-radar big fish name, Pete Carroll. Pete kind of got forced out in Seattle. He said he didn't want to be done coaching. For someone as old as he is, he sure as hell does not look it. He looks super, super young at this time. He looks really great for his age. He's had success at other spots as well. Not so much of the Jets. Did actually have a little bit of success in New England, which is kind of funny that all 3 of the big fish names, whether it was a player or a coach, were in New England, by the way. But has the game passed Pete Carroll by? What do the Cowboys want? How much power does the front office want to give up? Those are things you got to vet. And what's the quarterback situation like? Because if Dak's not under contract, I don't think this is, or even if Lance doesn't show great promise and gets extended or whatever, if you don't have a QB under contract, this is not as intriguing as a job as the name brand might suggest. So who do you want to be the next Dallas Cowboys head coach? Sound off for me in the comment section of today's show, the pinned comment of this video. Now, the intriguing names from those young offensive minds. Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions, who would have been high on my list had the Cowboys fired Mike McCarthy this past offseason. Commanders, I thought were going to get him. He ended up saying no. Wanted to take some more time. He's not going to jump for any job, clearly. Maybe Dallas, and maybe all this job security the Jonas have shown, guys like Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy, does make things more intriguing. But coaches know they might only get one shot. What's that quarterback spot look like? But in theory, a young offensive coach could mold a young quarterback. Bobby Slowick, I think, has shown that in a small sample size in Houston. He gets at least some credit for C.J. Stroud's development in year one, who was awesome. Stroud and Dak actually have some very similarities in play style. I think that offense would work well. In fact, hiring the Shanahan guy, which Slowick is, by the way, not a bad idea. Frank Smith is an intriguing name to me. That is the Dolphins' offensive coordinator. Unlike Johnson and Slowick, it's not really his offense, you know? It's Mike McDaniel's offense, but he's learned a lot from it. It was the Shanahan offense. Maybe going down that tree path isn't the worst idea. Some tier droppings here in terms of like I said, it's Johnson and Slowick for me, then kind of a tier 2 grouping. Shane Waldron. He's on this list as more of a projection. I like some of the stuff he did in Seattle. There's some creativity, some motion. I like all of that. There were also times like, okay, that was kind of a weird play call. But if he has success with Caleb Williams, he's going to be a hot candidate. I think an under-the-radar name who should not be overlooked is Drew Petzing. That is the Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator. Hasn't really been linked much in terms of coaching searches, but he does come from that Stefanski offense that I think works pretty well. He was the Browns quarterbacks coach for a little bit, spent time in Minnesota under Mike Zimmer, so you could actually just hire Petzing, keep Zimmer as the defensive coordinator. I think he did a great job with Arizona last year. I think he's an underrated young offensive mind. Joe Brady, meanwhile, has had a fun little arc of he's the next great young offensive mind. Scapegoated in Carolina, has rebuilt that image, and then took over for the Bills. As Ken Dorsey kind of got scapegoated too, by the way, a little bit. But he did a good job with Buffalo. Young offensive mind again. Going to get some conversation there. Todd Monken actually isn't that young. Relative to some of these other guys, like Drew Petzing is 37 years old. Monken is 58. So there is a pretty big age gap there. Of note, he has been a head coach before. He was the head coach at Southern Miss before he took the Bucs OC job. Had one of the weirdest years ever with the Browns OC where, like, Freddie Kitchens would change the game plan the day of. Seriously, that would happen. But he did a great job with Ravens and Lamar. And just one little crazy idea. Kellen Moore. It really wasn't that great in LA, and it might not be very good in Philadelphia, but the Joneses like guys they're comfortable with. And if the Eagles' offense clicks again, you know Kellen Moore is going to get head coaching interviews. He was not that far away from getting it in Carolina. And if you do re-sign Dak loved Kellen. He loved Doug Nussmeier. It would be very weird, but I think it is a semi-possibility there. I'm very curious how you guys vote on this one. What is your confidence level in the Cowboys to hire the right head coach if they do fire Mike after this season? Scale it for me from 1 to 10 in the comments section. We'll go a little bit less in depth on some of these names. The young defensive minds, right? Aaron Glenn is going to get interviews over and over again. The former player, he's the Lions DC. Has the Dan Campbell coaching tree benefit. Ejiro Evero has been a good DC in Carolina with not maybe the most talent there. Anthony Weaver has drawn leadership praise. Jeff Ulbrich is the Jets defensive coordinator. Weaver got head coaching interviews, by the way, this past year. Love what the Jets do on defense. Zachary Orr, by the way, got picked by the Ravens over guys like Denard Wilson and Anthony Weaver. They had multiple assistants leave once Mike McDonald left. Orr was a surprise pick. That is a former NFL starting linebacker, by the way. Now, we'll have Cowboys videos for you guys all year long. The Mike McCarthy hot seat status, I know, will not be going away anytime soon, but we'll have coverage for you. Hit that sub button right now. A couple second chance candidates I want to get to. Brian Flores is the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator. He went 10-6, 9-8 in Miami before getting fired. Now, his issue was he missed on the offensive coordinator, like each time. And that's the downside of hiring a defensive mind. If you don't hit on the OC, you're in trouble. But Flores is going to get a second chance at some point. Steve Wilkes, maybe still should be the Panthers head coach. He went 6-6 as the interim, and the Frank Reich era was a disaster. Now, the issue was he also went 3-13 in Arizona, but that was a bad team. I do think had the Cowboys fired McCarthy, I believe they would have interviewed Steve Wilks for that job. I believe he would have had an interview with the Dallas Cowboys, and maybe Anthony Lynn would have been an offensive coordinator candidate alongside of that. Vance Joseph, which it is kind of funny to me, the career of Vance Joseph, who was the Broncos head coach and is now back in the same building as a defensive coordinator. To be fair, the entire organization changed. Ownership different, front office different, but that's very, very unusual. He was 11-21 in 2 games in Denver. I also think his defenses are a little bit overrated. All things being equal, what type of coach would you prefer? O for offense or D for defense? Now, the current head coaches I'll at least make note of. I do think the Mike Tomlin odds have dropped. I built this Monday morning. Monday afternoon, he gets a 3-year extension. Only a 3-year extension, not that long actually for Mike Tomlin. It is also at least just worth mentioning, which is also kind of funny for Dallas, Mike Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game since the 2016 season. That's been a long time for him. But his teams always finish 500 or better. Then again, isn't that what we just said about Mike McCarthy? Big difference there is the offense has been much more talented in Dallas. Brian Daboll, the Giants head coach. I guess I made a typo on that one there. Brian Daboll, the former Bills offensive coordinator, now the Giants head coach. He has gone 9-7-1 in year one as that Giants head coach, then 6-11 this past year. He's kind of on the hot seat. Doug Peterson, meanwhile, got fired in Philadelphia quickly. It ended up working out fine. I've been fairly disappointed by his tenure in Jacksonville. These are all notable names. Daboll might be the most realistic good one, but Peterson's trying to make Press Taylor happen. I don't like that idea very much. 4 names that have Cowboys connections. I would not sleep on Mike Zimmer. There is a possibility of that happening. And I think he would have been he would have got a head coach interview too if they had fired Mike McCarthy. So I'm not ruling out Zim. 2 guys that left the Cowboys organization this past year, Adam Dirty and Joe Witt, are defensive coordinators. They could get interviews for the Cowboys. Al Harris is a super long shot, but I actually think he makes a little bit more sense as a head coach right now than a coordinator with just his overall style. Kind of like how you saw Dan Campbell not really be an OC, but get to be a head coach. I'll mention some college candidates here. I think you'll see more coaches jump to the NFL, although I have issues there because if you don't like the way the NIL structure is going, you're going to go to the NFL? It's becoming more like the NFL, not less like the NFL with NIL. Anyway, I digress. Matt Campbell gets linked every year. There was a point where I was very intrigued by Lincoln Riley. I'm not now. I was very disappointed with his offense. I thought it was terrible last year. I thought he checked out. And I have a problem with Lincoln Riley where when the going's gotten tough, he and his teams tend to fold a little bit. Big year for him, for me to get back on board. Kirby Smart is probably the best college coach with Nick Saban gone. He's not happening, by the way. So I'll put him on there. And we're due for a Brian Kelly to the NFL rumor to get a new contract from a college team. Happens once every couple of seasons. Normally with the Jets, by the way. I've got 4 controversial candidates on here that I am not a fan of. And Deion Sanders is first up. I'd be more open to having Shedeur as my quarterback. I don't want Deion as my NFL head coach. College coach, we can have that conversation. That's very different. The things that Deion says he does well, that I think he does do well, don't apply to the NFL. We're also anointing him after a 4-win Colorado season. It's not exactly a very good campaign. They might very well make some noise this year. I hope they do. It's fun. But Deion has said he does not want to be an NFL head coach. I would not be shocked if the Joneses asked him for an interview. But I don't think it's going to work. Deion is my all-time favorite NFL football player. The ego's too much. There's too much. You can't be an NFL head coach out there tweeting, that player sucked. That's not how it works. All right? And frankly, this organization is already too much of a circus at times. You put Deion into this, it's like there's already a fire going, and you just grabbed a giant tank of gasoline and threw it in the middle of it. I think it would be a nightmare. It would be chaotic and crazy, and I think it'd be a complete disaster. But that's just my opinion. Would you hire Deion Sanders? H for you'd hire him. P for you'd pass. I am very worried they're going to have interest in Jason Witten. I am very worried. And I think that would be a terrible hire. I love Witten. Again, one of my favorite Cowboys. Obviously, Deion was my favorite ever. But Witten has done a really good job at Liberty Christian Academy in Argyle, Texas. It's a smaller school. Has won a lot of games. Cool. It's a high school head coach. Never coached in the NFL. As I've said before, Jason Witten knows ball. That's great. We know his name. He was terrible as an ESPN analyst. Doesn't matter. The NFL head coaching requirement or any key personnel role is not, well, he knows ball, therefore he'd be a good coach. No. He knows ball is the minimum requirements. It cannot be your defining feature to why you work. He's never been a head coach in the NFL. Never coached in the NFL. Too much of an adjustment period. Does he want to come be my tight ends coach? Let's ride. Head coach? Hell no. Hell no. I would not be surprised if Marvin Lewis gets an interview because the last time the Cowboys had a head coaching interview, they interviewed Mike McCarthy and Marvin Lewis. And all of our issues about not being a good playoff team literally was Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati. Over and over again. Finally, I'll mention Cliff Kingsbury here as well, the Commanders' offensive coordinator. He keeps failing upward. I don't want him to fail upward into Dallas. I'm not interested at all for that angle.